everybody. We're going to get this meeting started. Apologies and thank you again so much for tolerating us as we were having some technical issues. We were trying to simultaneously run 2 meetings out of my department at the same time. Apparently can't do both at once, so ours wins out. For everybody that is not familiar with me, which is probably a great many of you, as we have 94 people on the call, my name is Ellie Ray. I'm a planner with the City of Helena Community Development Department, and I am here tonight to welcome you to this meeting that's talking about the Our Redeemer Lutheran Church housing project. So this meeting tonight is entirely informational only. I want to preface all of our discussions by making it clear to everybody that's on this call that this meeting is regarding a project that is still very much in the planning phases. So nothing is a certainty with any of the development proposals at present. We are really just trying to engage with all of you as people who live within the vicinity of the project site or have an interest in the project altogether, to kind of get a feel from you about what you're thinking of what's being proposed as far as the density of the housing, the look and feel of the housing, and the amenities that are going to be provided for the neighborhood with the development proposal. So again, it's informational, nothing is firmly set in stone. We are definitely seeking input and we're happy to answer any questions you have. The way things are going to work tonight is we're going to have our consultant team present a PowerPoint presentation to you all. And then at the culmination of that, we will open the floor up to any questions or comments that you may have. And for those of you that haven't ever worked in Zoom before, I just want to let you know that you did enter this meeting muted, as you probably could tell. Come the time that we open the floor to questions and comments, what we're going to do is allow you to use the raise hand function. And once you raise your hand, we'll try and track you in the order that the hands get raised. And then we will invite you to unmute and present any questions or comments you have. Another alternative to doing that, if you'd like, is you're welcome to enter any questions or comments you have into the chat box function. If any of you have joined us via phone, there is also a way for you to engage in this manner. If you would like to raise your hand, so to speak, when we get to the question and comment portion of the meeting, all you have to do is press *9. And then once we acknowledge you and to let you unmute, all you'll have to do is press *6. And we will run through these directions for you when we get to that portion of this meeting. We hope to end this by 7:30, just for in the interest of everybody's time. Obviously, we're getting started a little bit late, so if we need to extend that a little, I think we can probably accommodate that this evening. And with that said, I think we're ready to kick things off, and I'm going to hand everything over to the 2 lead architects on our consultant team. And they are Gretchen Crum and Jeff Downhour from Mosaic Architects, and they're going to run through the presentation for you this evening. So again, thank you. And if you have any questions as they arise about technical issues or otherwise over the course of this, please feel free to just shoot those into the chat box and we will try to address it on a case-by-case basis. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody, and good evening, Ellie. It looks like I still need permission to share my screen from you. And you're muted, Ellie.
Gretchen, you should now be co-host, so.
All right, thank you.
Yep. And apologies for everybody if you haven't attended Zoom before, or if you have, you probably know that there are often technical issues that arise as we've already had this evening. So if you bear with us, we would greatly appreciate that.
There we go. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can, Gretchen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for joining us. This is Gretchen Crum, and with me is Jeff Downhour from Mosaic Architecture. We, along with a collaborative team of SMA Architecture, have been hired to help lead this planning effort. This is, again, collaborative focus between Mosaic and SMA, as well as getting engineering support from Staley Engineering and financial and funding model support from GL Development. And if you don't already know, this partnership was formed and applied for a CDBG planning grant. So I'm going to introduce this coalition of partners who've come together to explore these possibilities, opportunities and challenges of putting this land to use for affordable housing, And I'm going to give you a brief introduction to each of these partners, and then following this slide, I'll give each partner the opportunity to introduce themselves and explain a bit more about their organization. This group of partners jointly applied for a CDBG planning grant and was with the City of Helena as our grant sponsor. And we were awarded that grant to fund this planning and feasibility effort. So the partners involved are Our Redeemer Lutheran Church. They're a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and they are the property owner. The City of Helena, who is the CDBG grant sponsor. Trust Montana, who is a community land trust. They hold land in trust for affordable housing and establish ground leases with the building owners. The resale of buildings within a community land trust are restricted to income qualified buyers, and price escalation is capped to ensure long-term affordability of the properties. Also, Rocky Mountain Development Council is here with us. They develop, own, and manage affordable rental housing. Helena Area Habitat for Humanity builds housing for income qualified people who can afford a reduced cost home and qualify for a loan, and they use grant funding and materials donations and volunteers assistance to reduce the cost of those newly built homes. Also with us is the YWCA. They have a goal of interrupting cycles of homelessness for women specifically, and most of these women have young children with them. And they are really focused on addressing issues related to poverty, mental health, and substance abuse that are at the root of that homelessness. So I'm going to turn this over to Liz Monstad, if she would introduce Rocky Mountain.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hello, my name is Liz Monstad. I'm with Rocky Mountain Development Council. I know you can't see me, but that slide is a lot better looking than I am anyway. So what we do is, since about, I think our first project was completed in 2001. We have been developing and then managing affordable housing projects, basically in the Tri-County area. And typically our developments recently, and what we would probably propose here is, for lack of a better word, it's kind of workforce housing, family housing. We've got 600 people on our waiting list. So we can see a need here, and that's why we came to the table for this project. Rocky is more than just housing. We have our development and management, and then we have, most people are familiar with Head Start. We have weatherization, we have senior programs, a senior center. I'm probably forgetting other things, but we kind of are in every piece of Helena and part of the community. So we're excited to work with these partners and hopefully create some more housing for our community that we desperately need.
Thank you, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
Next, I'd like to introduce Jacob Kuhntz with Helena Area Habitat for Humanity.
Hey everybody, Jacob Kuhntz, Director of Habitat for Humanity. We build housing that people can afford. And that's in a nutshell. The majority of people in the Helena area currently qualify for our programs because of the rapid appreciation of homes we've seen over the last few years. We've seen increases in prices of 50% going back to 2016, 100% if you look back to 2012. So families, working families who are just trying to afford the cost of their lives, who are populating our businesses, who are working in all the organizations in our town that make Helena the place it needs to be, are not able to afford a basic affordable home. It's very, very difficult anymore to find a house that's anywhere under $300,000. It just doesn't exist in Helena. So the work that we do is just bringing home ownership in reach of working families who are willing to put in the sweat equity to build not only their homes, but the homes of their neighbors. We build in groups. We empower people to be able to solve their housing situation. So sweat equity is a big part. We work very well with Trust Montana, with Land Trust, to ensure that the work that we do in building affordable homes remain permanently affordable. We currently primarily build in Helena, but we're also building in Red Lodge, Montana, and in rural communities throughout Montana. We're trying to help these small towns who are all struggling to meet the affordable housing needs of their communities, to build more housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Next, I'd like to introduce Jen Gursky with YWCA.
Hi there, this is Jen Gursky, and I'm the Executive Director of YWCA. Quick introduction of our programs and the organization that we are today. We operate WINGS, which stands for Women Initiating New Growth and Stability. This is really what is our transitional living and supportive housing element in our program. We can serve and house up to 24 women and 15 children in our current facility downtown. And we find that we have an ever-increasing wait list for our programs. The program that is WINGS is a 6 to 12 month program that is really centered around intensive outpatient therapy for women struggling with substance use disorder. We are a 2.1 facility, which means we are not an inpatient, we are not locked doors. The best way to describe the WINGS program is kind of like a halfway house between needing really intensive and inpatient care to being able to sustain recovery and independence in the community. We also have a Caterpillars program that initiated in 2015 and has grown to be one of our flagship programs and provide child and family therapy, supervised parenting. We just got the final check mark on licensing for a trauma-informed child care center. We do one-on-one parenting coaching. We provide family advocacy for families who are navigating CPS and wanting to be safe and stable families. I think it's important to note that of the women that we serve each year, we're experiencing about an 83% graduation rate. So what that looks like is women come in and they have about 20 hours each week of therapeutic care in this outpatient but residential program. And when they graduate, they move down into a program called aftercare. So WINGS aftercare is about 3 hours per week. In the proposed project for YWCA, it is the graduates of the intensive programming. So those folks that have already graduated and are looking for long-term housing. The crunch we're experiencing in our program, and quite honestly, is very similar to like programs in our community and across the state, is that we don't have enough rentals to move graduates into. So they end up staying at the YWCA in this intensive program longer than what their needs are, and it's truncating the ability for them to move into independence in the community and be successful neighbors. At an 83% graduation rate, we really want to be moving successful folks into our community. We are proposing a project that Mosaic is going to go into, but the programming aspect for YWCA in this project is that it would be, again, an after graduation of the intensive program. We would transition women into supportive housing, and then we would also have 2 YWCA or more staff on site to help with further case management. HUD standards for transitional supportive housing are up to 24 months. So a woman could live at the proposed project for up to 24 months. And then the hope is be able to access some of the affordable housing represented by the other partners here in that full continuum. We're looking at a facility with the same capacity as our downtown facility. And truly, as we navigate this conversation with both our partners and our board, are realizing that it really meets current need of what we're experiencing right now. Thanks, Gretchen.
Thank you, Jen. Next, I'd like to introduce Erika Harold with Trust Montana.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can be.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm Erika Harold. I'm the director of Trust Montana. We are a statewide community land trust. And the first question we usually get is, what is a community land trust? So a community land trust is a nonprofit organization that holds the land for the benefit of a community to preserve the affordability of homes and other real estate. CLTs tend to ensure that the public subsidies invested in the community remain in the community for the long term. And in Montana, we have limited public subsidy available to help people buy homes. So the CLT model is increasingly popular here as a way to provide more people with home ownership opportunity over time. Homeowners buy their homes at below market prices thanks to grants and other subsidies. And in this case, thanks to our partnership with Habitat for Humanity. And the CLT model leverages the work that Habitat puts in to the development to ensure that serves the community for the long term. Home buyers buy their homes at below market prices, and then they sign a ground lease that ensures that that home remains affordable to all subsequent buyers. The ground lease also ensures other things, including that the homes are only resold to income qualified home purchasers in the future, that homes are maintained, resale prices are affordable to the next buyer, and that the community land trust can intervene and help a home buyer if they have trouble in the future, and they can retain the purchase option to buy the home to ensure the home doesn't go into foreclosure. Homes are only able to be used as primary residences, so they cannot be short-term rentals. That's a growing problem for a lot of communities in Montana right now. A lot of residential homes are being turned into Airbnbs and VRBOs. This helps to ensure the homeowner is successful and the investment in the home is preserved for the community for the long term. And that investment doesn't just serve one family, but serves many over the next few years. So homeowners in a Habitat CLT home have built their own home and have helped their neighbors build their homes in a lot of cases. And so a lot of people take a lot of pride in the homes that they have worked really hard to build. They're putting in tons of hours every weekend on top of their jobs to build their homes. The homeowners complete homeowner education courses prior to purchase. Trust Montana actually has a full-time stewardship coordinator that supports homeowners long-term, and they ensure that the properties are maintained. The coordinator travels the state at least once per year to visit all the homes, and we maintain good relationships with all the homeowners in our program so that we can help them in the case of any issue where they might be facing problems paying their mortgage or other issues. The community land trust benefits the community for the long term as well as the individual. So we provide workforce housing so essential employees can stay in the community even as market prices rise out of reach. This gives people the opportunity to earn equity. So this model serves people who are otherwise stuck in the rental market and are not earning any equity. Nationally, 6 out of 10 community land trust homeowners use their earned equity to purchase a traditional market rate home. So in that way, it acts as a stepping stone from rental to regular market rate home ownership. Over 99% of CLT homeowners avoid foreclosure. This is because of that low purchase price and the fact that the community land trust is there to support them long term. And studies have shown that community land trust homes do help stabilize the surrounding property values. In part, this is due to that low foreclosure rate and just stabilizing the neighborhood in general with some homeowners that are paying taxes and working in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Hermina. Sorry. Next, I'd like to introduce Cody Slo. He's second vice president of the Our Redeemer Lutheran Church Council.
All right, thanks, Gretchen. First off, I'd like to share a few things about Our Redeemer Lutheran Church for those of you that may not be as familiar with us. Our Redeemer is a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which just is one of the larger denominations of the Lutheran belief. And so Our church has many missions, and we've been doing a lot of discussing and planning at our church. We're looking at the possibilities of expanding our own missions within our property. And some of these additions include potentially expanding our preschool, which is one of the missions that we're very proud of. We would also like to provide more opportunities for youth activity, including some outdoor spaces and so forth, and potentially some indoor spaces as well. We're also looking at potentially providing some sort of a daycare service through a partnership. There's been a lot of interest from surrounding groups and also the church and so forth with the congregation to provide that kind of a service somehow in the future. We're also looking at an outdoor amphitheater and also a columbarium memorial site within the property. Our church has always had the vision of using our property to serve the Helena community. And the development of our property would really allow our church to form new partnerships and provide opportunities for our congregation to interact and collaborate with these partners to expand our services and missions as well. So there's definitely some synergy there that we'd like to potentially capitalize on. And so really our church is ready to meet the needs of the community and the housing shortage that it faces. The development of the land would also allow us the opportunity to serve those in need and really to refocus our congregation towards new challenges and other missions that we have as well.
Thank you, Cody. So the first phase of this planning effort that we engaged in was specifically with working with the church congregation to help them establish their own mission priorities for their land. Additionally, we held a neighborhood meeting to explore what neighborhood needs the church might be able to meet through future mission development. The church wanted to define these future mission priorities for the purposes of determining how much property they wanted to retain for those future missions that might require additional land development. So when the church building was planned, there was always a planned second phase of the church expansion that would happen on the east side of the building. And that's shown in the dotted area on the site plan. Lately, as the church has taken summer worship outdoors into their parking lot, there's been a desire to create a more pleasant outdoor worship environment, and that can be used for outdoor worship and concerts and performances and other youth activities. You can see this outdoor worship area shown off the southeast corner of the building. Additionally, the church has long hoped to develop a memorial garden and a columbarium where cremated remains of members and loved ones can be interned on the site in a garden setting. And this is represented by the series of circular nodes that are surrounded by green gardens just south of the outdoor worship area. The church building currently houses, as Cody said, a preschool in the west wing of the building. And the church sees that with further development of the neighborhood and expansion of that preschool could be possible and very serviceable. Additionally, they've recognized the community need for additional daycare services and are in hopes of finding a partner who would be interested in running a daycare on the property. So the purple and yellow boxes west of the church building represent these expanded preschool and daycare functions, along with shared outdoor play space between them. It was also important to the church to maintain and allow for expansion of their existing community garden located along the north edge of their site. And with the possibility of new neighbors, it's the hope of the church that this plot will get better utilized by all. Currently, we provide a great deal of produce to Helena Food Share. The southeast corner of the property is not developable due to required stream setbacks. And it's hoped that this portion of the property could be dedicated to city parks. Additionally, there is a high pressure gas line that runs east-west through the property, and that requires a 30-foot easement free of structures. Ultimately, the revised property line that can be seen in white on this site plan was used for planning purposes and received majority support from the congregation in a meeting in November and allowed the planning effort to move toward planning housing on the remainder of the site. This is what the current zoning map of this area looks like. With the church property indicated in the red box, North of the church is a mix of R3 and R4 zoning. Both of those zoning categories allow for single family through multifamily housing of 3 or more units. R4 allows slightly taller buildings, allows greater lot coverage, and allows for some uses that are not allowed in R3. South of the church property is zoned R3 and R2. R2 allows single family and duplexes, but not buildings with 3 or more units. Currently, the church property is zoned PLI for public lands and institutions along the north, B1, which is business in the southwest corner, and R2 along the remainder of the south. So the church property will need to be rezoned R3 and R4, similar to adjacent parcels if this project were to move forward. Here's a map showing the existing connectors between Benton Avenue and Green Meadow Drive. These connectors are really important to the neighborhood for dispersing traffic flows and providing alternative routes into and out of the area. This potential development would provide an additional connector street south of the church, which would be an extension of Horseshoe Bend Road and is shown in the kind of peach colored arrow on the map here. This connector will help reduce traffic burden on the Benton-Custer intersection, as well as on these existing connectors in the neighborhood. This is a map showing comparative housing densities in the area. Because the housing need in our community is so great, and because of the current cost of construction, efficient use of the land and resources has dictated that we at least assess higher densities on this property while balancing the need for open space and walkability. And those were high priorities we heard from the neighborhood at a previous meeting: walkability and open space. So if you look at the blue box on the north, this is the Elkhorn Flats apartments area, previously known as Happy Homes. The density in this area is about 12.5 units per acre, and it's all single level construction. The box that's kind of peach colored along Green Meadow Drive is multifamily housing with a density of about 11.3 units per acre. The green box is a mixture of single family and multifamily with an alley pattern access to garages, and that has about a 4.6 unit per acre density. There's a senior living facility with 17 beds at the yellow arrow. And in the dark orange box are larger single family homes with driveways with a density of about 3.4 units per acre. So the master plan we're showing you tonight has a proposed housing density on the ORLC site of 11.7 units per acre. So you can see the proposed density is in keeping with surrounding multifamily development, and that what we'll show is multi-story solutions do afford the project more remaining open space. Comparing densities is one way of assessing a neighborhood, but the approach to building massing and open space is an even more critical way of evaluating land use priorities and neighborhood environment. And as you can see in these two plan view comparisons of the same size, the advantage of using multi-story solutions to increase density is that it affords more open space to the benefit of the entire neighborhood. This also points out the difference between a developer-driven project that benefits from repetition and maximizing rentable space, and a community-driven project such as this that can tap federal and municipal subsidies and maintain goals of creating viable community and prioritizing shared spaces. The last difference I would point out is the approach to city streets. This development is planning to internal streets that would meet the city's complete street standards, including street widths that can accommodate on-street parking, a boulevard buffer, and sidewalks. In contrast, the Elkhorn Flats development is private streets, much narrower in width, and no boulevard or on-street parking.
And you'll notice in the master plan to date, we have kind of taken a lot of effort in moving the parking off of the streets and providing adequate parking that doesn't rely on the streets being lined with cars. There are, in the Habitat homes proposed, there are garages, and in the multifamily housing, there is off-street parking lots, again, trying to free up the streets as space for people more than for cars.
So these were some of the project goals that came out of our meetings with these partnering organizations. Create a neighborhood that connects to the larger community, create a financially feasible development that provides long-term affordability to homeowners and renters, create living units that prioritize individual privacy and dignity, prioritize sustainable development principles, and seek and encourage partner collaboration. And then when we did a brainstorming exercise with all these partners about key characteristics of a great neighborhood, these were the kinds of ideas that came forth and that we're aspiring to achieve in this development. Again, very similar aspirations than that we heard from the neighborhood in terms of having safe, walkable, open space, parks and boulevards. So this is the currently proposed master plan for housing on the site. It's configured to align with what we heard from our neighbors in terms of wanting to maintain open space and walkability. You can see the proposed park dedication in the southeast corner of the property, and it's connected to a green parkway that runs through the entire property, and that follows the high pressure gas line that runs underneath. This green parkway provides opportunities to link each partner in the neighborhood and provide public amenities such as playgrounds, benches, a community center, which can be seen here in building number 12 in the center of the site. In addition to the green parkway, sidewalks and walking paths are shown along each street and running along the north and west boundaries of the site. They're kind of shown in orange on this diagram. So as Jeff was saying, we've tried as much as feasible to tuck parking areas behind buildings so that street and sidewalk frontages are unimpeded by parking lots. And the parking provided will meet zoning requirements. So the blue roofs on this plan represent proposed Habitat for Humanity homes. And each home is proposed to be a townhouse style with 2 to 4 units per building. Each of the Habitat homes will have a single garage. The north boundary of the property here is proposed to be Habitat duplexes and triplexes that are single level. So they match the scale and height of the adjacent single family homes there. The yellow roofs represent RMDC apartment buildings. These buildings are proposed to be a mix of 2 and 3 story. The 3-story buildings are shown in the white box. So taller buildings are configured to provide a buffer to Green Meadow Drive, which has higher traffic counts and speeds than the other surrounding streets. The other 3-story building is located near the center of the site, so it doesn't impede view sheds from surrounding developments. The orange roof buildings house 20 efficiency units for the YWCA, along with supportive services building for counseling offices and group meetings. The building in the southwest corner of the site with the number 1 on it is proposed to be a small market. We don't know yet who might be the partner on this idea yet, but the thought is to provide basic food staples on site. Perhaps it's some sort of co-op or a cooperation with Helena Food Share. So the total number of units proposed is 33 for Habitat for Humanity, 78 for RMDC, and 20 for the YWCA, for a total of 131 homes.
And I think, again, just to highlight a few of some of the thinking on the plan is looking at the way the parking is done, kind of maybe in contrasting this to the development to the very north of the northern neighborhood. With city streets, we have to provide the city setbacks. We have to provide boulevards and street trees and sidewalks. So when you're going through this neighborhood, it's going to be very open feeling along the streets. So that idea that the density might be a little higher, but it's the little bit taller buildings, the 2- and 3-story, that allow us to open up the streets like a normal street. The other thinking of that is we have some diagrams to show you is, a 2-story building is basically matching height-wise what a typical 2-story house would. A 2-story apartment is actually often a little bit lower than a typical house because for accessibility reasons, they're set lower and the floor-to-floor heights are typically a little lower. And then a typical 3-story building, even though it's 3-story and a larger footprint, again, they tend to be lower floor-to-floor heights. So the eve line of a 3-story apartment is probably only 6 feet or so taller than a 2-story single-family home. So we took that into account and kind of looking at the impact of the height of the buildings on kind of adjoining and neighboring lots, especially on the north side. Again, though, if you've seen the Habitat units, they may be joined into a duplex, but the only joining space is the garage. So they really come across as single family homes with a little bit of a connection. They're not a taller unit. They're low. They have front porches. They have connected garages. For all intents and purposes, they look like every other single family home that you would go by. Towards the south of the site, we have some that are a little more townhouse units that are a little more connected. But again, they're fairly small scale buildings, and you'll see that in some of the imagery.
So this is a bird's eye view, kind of looking southwest from above the church building and across the housing development. And in this view, you can kind of see that green park space and the connector green parkway that runs through the whole site. So you can see also the community garden off to the right-hand side, and pathways that would connect across the church property as well. Here's another view looking south. Again, these buildings that are currently shown are just mock-ups for the purposes of analyzing scale and density. They haven't been designed yet. That's on down the road, future tasks. But when we look at a master planning effort, we're just trying to look conceptually at scale and size. This is a view from the southwest corner where you can see that small market that's proposed, as well as the 3-story buildings along Green Meadow. Here we've used the parking areas as a buffer between Green Meadow and the living units along here. We've also provided a walking path along that western edge. And here's a view of what some of those Habitat townhouses along Horseshoe Bend might look like. Again, some homes would have garages facing the street while others were accessed from behind. And I think that provides a real nice variety to the facades. And again, as Jeff was saying, even though they're connected, they have the scale and sensibility of very similar to a single family home.
And again, we haven't designed the buildings, but certainly the direction would be to kind of pick up on some of that craftsman style, steeper pitched roofs that you see in the neighborhood. And again, the scale of these is very, very similar to the homes you see in the neighborhood.
So here's a couple of view sections through the site. This top section is cut north-south through the site, showing the existing single-family homes on the left, the 1-story zone that's proposed along that north boundary of the property, and how that climbs to a 2-story zone, and then a 3-story zone at the center of the site, back down to a 2-story zone on the south edge. You can see the lightened image of the existing church building beyond, which is approximately the same height as the proposed 3-story buildings. So we actually have a representative sample out there. You can see what that feels like. The lower image is a section cut along Green Meadow Drive, where you can see the comparative heights of the existing multifamily buildings north of the property to the proposed 3-story buildings on this site.
And again, if you look at the north, or the drawing at the top of the page here, we're pretty intentionally trying to get the little bit taller buildings, the 3-story buildings, and they're about a full block away from the north property line. So again, that being a few feet higher than a typical 2-story house, but it's nearly about a block away. If you look at the scale of this lot, it's about 2 city blocks to the north-south and about 3 city blocks east-west. So I'll give you a sense of scale of the overall project. So again, that center 3-story building is, again, it's about a block away from the north end of the site that we're looking at.
This last view just really accents that green parkway. That would be a fantastic element, I think, for connecting all of these partners on the site. Could become a place for providing a lot of public amenities like playgrounds and this community center access, walking paths for the whole neighborhood.
And I guess one other thing to add, and it's not shown on this, but we did meet with the school district. They are actually pretty excited about the project and feel like they you know, especially if they know ahead of time this is coming, they could easily fit this into their school plan. And one of the things they brought up is the opportunity maybe to try to work in another Head Start program in this area of town. Head Start programs are dispersed throughout town. They do single classrooms sort of arrangement. So that might be another option for some of those common spaces. Is there a way with these partners to provide Head Start program space and perhaps along that greenway, which would be a great amenity for the neighborhood.
So you might be wondering about the proposed timeline and next steps for this project. Currently, the planning consultants are working on wrapping up what we've been tasked to do, which is a preliminary architectural report. The remainder of this year will likely be occupied with establishing planning partner agreements and land transfer agreements, because there's no firm agreement that's been established yet. So if those agreements can be reached, then there would likely be another year's worth of work to complete the subdivision and rezoning process that's required, as well as designing the first infrastructure piece, which would need to be Horseshoe Bend Road. During that year, they would also need to conduct a traffic impact study, because that is one of the requirements of that subdivision process. So again, you know, it would be probably 2024 when you could likely see the earliest construction work, and that would be the installation of Horseshoe Bend. During that time, our housing partners could be funding their planning work, finding the appropriate funding they need, and starting their own design work. And then 2025 and 2026 could be occupied with construction, and it could go beyond that. Rocky Mountain Development Council usually can fund and put their projects in place kind of in one foul swoop, but Habitat for Humanity may take much longer. They are ramping up their abilities currently, but it will still take some time for them to establish their housing on the site. So I'm gonna kick this back to Ellie to kind of manage the protocols for how we're gonna take comment and questions.
Thank you, Gretchen, so much for this wonderful presentation, and to all the project partners on this. We've been getting a bunch of questions coming in fast and furious. So before we actually allow people to comment by raising their hand, I would like to first try to start addressing some of these questions that have so far been posed. So the first question that we got right out of the gate was, are all the homes proposed to be Habitat homes? And in answer to that first question, the houses that are going to be allowed to be for sale are going to be Habitat for Humanity homes, but the rest of the units are a blend of Rocky Mountain Development Council rental units and also transitional living facility rental units through the YWCA. I'm going to try and blow through some of these as quick as I can for the partners in the interest of time, where I'm able to answer them, by the way. What are the impacts of the Habitat for Humanity home values on comparable values in the neighborhood? And this one I'd like to actually field to Ermina.
Yes. So comps of community land trust homes are not allowed to be used for market rate homes. We are actually in the process of continuing to educate appraisers in Montana to ensure that they completely understand that. But because those are artificially lower than market rate, they are not supposed to use community land trust homes to come up with the values for market rate homes in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ermina. Appreciate that. Hopefully that was helpful to individuals on the call. The next question that we got in the chat box was, what can be done to help mitigate water shortages? And that's a really good question. And to that, I appreciate that I don't represent the city's public works department. However, what I would say is that the city is actively engaged in trying to make substantial improvements to our water treatment facilities and basically increase the production volumes that can be allowed, so that when we have instances where there's drought like this past summer, hopefully the impacts are lessened to everybody. This project, though, I will state, there is water capacity available for the project. So that is a concern that will be addressed more as part of the planning processes with the rezoning and subdivision as well, which are quite a ways down the road, likely in 2023, as Gretchen showed. The next question that came up is school system impacts. And I know that Jeff had brought this up in the course of the presentation too, but they have had some discussions, the consultant team, with the school district, and the school district, as mentioned, are excited about the prospect of this development, and they don't have any qualms about being able to have ample capacity to serve any children that might be living in this neighborhood. And the next question, I'm gonna let this go to Jeff and Gretchen. It's regarding view sheds, essentially. There were a lot of comments and concerns raised about having multi-level housing, especially just the 3-story housing as part of this overall development. So I know you provided some slides that show the different elevations from different areas in the neighborhood. Gretchen, Jeff, if you would like to just go through this again and kind of contextualize, what people are seeing here, and the relationship, I guess, and even in the height, looking at the church compared to some of these other buildings with the massing that you have.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I would reiterate that that height of building can actually be quite a nice buffer against a busy street like Green Meadow, and very suitable and appropriate there. And again, I would reiterate what Jeff said, which is looking at the whole scale of the site. And if we go back to the master plan, if I can get back here, the section shows it, but because of the street widths and because of where we've located parking, again, the 3-story building in the middle of the site is a full block away from development either on the north or the south, and won't impact view sheds to those far views. Again, we chose to include some 3-story buildings because it does provide more open space. And when we try to preserve spaces like what we're showing in the middle of the site here, which is a great big park expansion of that green parkway, really, with playgrounds, going up allows us to achieve a density similar to what you're seeing up in the north end of the development at Happy Homes or Elkhorn Flats, but with much more community context and amenities. Again, there's street widths with boulevard and sidewalks and setbacks to buildings that you're not seeing in that north development apartments.
The other thing I would kind of add to that is we kind of based the density on what we've heard from RMDC in terms of how they finance their projects. They provide a lot of oversight to their projects. They don't, they control parking, they control cars, they control the lawns, they do the landscaping. But in order to do that, they have to have a certain number of units in a development, and they have certain funding mechanisms. So we were targeting the number of units that we had here as a target to make the project work. And if they can get that number of units, that allows them more funding to do things like playgrounds and good landscaping in the community center. The smaller their projects get, then the less of those sorts of amenities they can afford to support with the development. So there's kind of a chicken and the egg there. Maybe there's a desire to do fewer units, but if you do fewer units, then you likely end up with fewer amenities, and you probably have to trim down a lot of the niceties and improvements that you might see on the site. So there's a little bit of a balancing act to make that work in terms of how each partnership works. So we did think long and hard about the view sheds. Any time you're in town, there's buildings kind of in the way of some view sheds. But again, making them taller allows us to give space between the units. We're not butted one up right up to another like you see in the Elkhorn. And that also gives them a little more funding to design the buildings to be more attractive buildings because they're getting some subsidy. Again, private development, when they're doing a lot of the kind of rental rate sort of things, they're very narrow in their margins, or they're trying to maximize their profits. And the first thing to go is kind of landscaping and grounds and open space, and the second thing to go is good building design. So or the opportunity to work with Rocky kind of helps make it a better development because of the way they fund their projects.
Thanks so much, Gretchen and Jeff. The next question that we had is a very valid question about how is this all going to be paid for? Who's actually going to own the land? So I just want to reiterate for everybody that this is still very much in the planning process. But what I can tell you is that the city is considering committing some of the ARPA funds. I'm blanking in this hour of the day on the acronym, what that stands for, the American Recovery Plan Act, I apologize. And using some of their direct allocation from the federal government to help with some of the infrastructure costs here to help with the acquisition of the property. As far as ownerships goes, it's been talked about how, a part of this project is hopefully going to be a community land trust. So in that instance, the land trust would take ownership of the land. And for Rocky Mountain Development Council, with their funding stream, we're not necessarily looking to include them in the community land trust because they might not be able to. So they would own the land underneath their property. And then that is currently what we're talking about. We're just trying to figure out whether the city will commit those funds or not, and then how ownership will be handled from there. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has anything they'd like to add to that really quickly.
That sounds right to me. This is Ermina with Trust Montana.
Thanks, Ermina, appreciate it. I guess we can move on to the next question. So there have been a number of questions raised about parking. I know and deeply appreciate that there are congestion issues in the area. So tied into this question, I also want to bring up another question that has been risen, which is what's going to be the right-of-way width through here? So as was mentioned in the presentation, we fully intend, if a development goes forward and it's approved for development by the city, that the streets that would be installed would be required to meet city standard widths. I would like to note that what that means for the interior streets is going to be 60-foot width per the current standards. And Horseshoe Bend could be about the same width, maybe a little bit wider. This is actually substantively very different from what you have up in the Elkhorn Flats Happy Homes area. Those do have lower widths. And those are private streets. These would be public city rights of way. So there is definitely functionally a difference there. As far as parking goes with these renderings, what the consultant team had worked on was meeting the zoning requirements for parking. So for single family homes or duplexes, you have to have 2 spaces provided per unit. And pardon me, for the multifamily housing, you're going to have to provide 1 space per unit. So the plans shown, and again, these are very early stage schematic designs, and nothing is fast and hard here, do comply with zoning when it comes to parking. So just ticking off some questions here.
But real quick, we would add that we didn't have to include all the on-street parking to meet that requirement. And RMDC does control cars, so that you're not allowed to have more cars just parked around the street or around the development. So it's in this scenario, you wouldn't have a parking problem like you do in the Elkhorn Flats area.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Related to the rights of way, there was a question about who actually is required to take care of the boulevard. So just like anybody that's a property owner in the area, you have to maintain your portion of the right of way that's adjacent to your property, landscape boulevard and whatever, clearing snow, etc. As has been mentioned though, particularly with respect to with all of these properties, whether it's in the land trust or whether it is the Rocky units, they're going to be required to handle maintenance and make sure that people are complying, to make sure the landscaping stays up to standards, etc. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. The next question we got is, could there be some more of a green space buffer between the housing that's shown here and what you see on Obsidian? And I did want to note that there is obviously a trail that's proposed, and certainly again, because this is early stage designs, we can absolutely look at trying to incorporate a little more green space as possible. This configuration that you see here, this density, again, nothing is actually set in stone. Just wanted to throw that out there. There was a question about what the actual zoning is for the Elkhorn Flats properties too. So quick answer to that question, that is currently zoned R3 residential. So it allows for multifamily housing by right and a small range of compatible commercial uses as well. Gretchen, I'm going to pass the next question along to you, relates to the zoning as well, but you've been talking about density and height and so forth. Could you talk about the height allowances for the different zoning districts nearby?
Yeah, so this is the zoning map again. The height allowance in R3 is 36 feet, and the height allowance in R4 is 42. So the zoning code doesn't actually dictate how many stories you can have, it dictates height, and it measures height kind of to the center of your gable, or the middle point of your gable height. It's not the proximal point, it's not the top of your gable. So in reality, you could do 3-story units in R3 as long as you could comply with that 36-foot maximum height. It doesn't disallow that.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Right. And currently all these buildings are under the 36-foot
Yeah.
floodway.
Yeah.
They're not approaching the 42-foot maximum at all.
And Jeff, just to clarify, you're talking about the ones that are in the preliminary designs.
Right.
Thank you. Okay. The next question actually relates to stormwater detention and retention ponds, and what is the plan for those? So at this stage of this planning project, we are working on a preliminary engineering report. So I should expect that there will be some consideration for that as part of it. And certainly, as mentioned before, there is going to be a subdivision process associated with this parcel, most likely. And then also a rezoning. So there will be further consideration of that moving forward. And I am scanning through questions here, more questions regarding the schools. Said the market, how about a Dairy Queen? Everybody likes ice cream. I respect that. There are some statements again about property values in the neighborhood. And again, as was mentioned by Ermina, the properties that are going to be home ownership units that are part of any future land trust, if one is created, are taken out of consideration by realtors for comparable purposes. So when you look to list your home, any of the homes that are part of this community land trust, again, if created, will be taken out of the comps consideration. So it won't affect your actual valuations. And Ermina, I don't know if you have anything additionally to add to it. I just said I hopefully encapsulated what you've mentioned before well enough.
Thank you. Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I did add some links into the Q&A because someone asked for the studies that I was referring to about stabilizing neighborhoods. So if you do want to read a little bit more about how community land trust homes have helped stabilize other neighborhoods in the US, you're welcome to look at those. And of course, email me if you have any other questions.
And I guess I would just add to that, property values have a lot to do with what the amenities in your neighborhood are. And when you have parks and walking paths and playgrounds, that's just a positive for anybody in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Gretchen and Ermina. And KDC, I would like to thank you for correcting me on the full name for the American Rescue Plan Act, not the Recovery Plan Act. I appreciate that. Scanning through other comments here. And yes, about landscaping and trying to make it low maintenance, I think that there's going to be every effort with landscaping to try and make it native species xeriscaping where possible, 100% to help with the conservation of water in the area. I appreciate that it's drier out in this part of the valley, so that makes great sense. Jen Gursky from the YWCA, there is a comment here about basically the residents that would be living in any future transitional living facility. And obviously a number of these women might have experienced substance abuse issues in the past. And, there'll be children in the neighborhood, what will be done for security. Could you speak to how you plan to manage your facility with staffing and other controls?
Yeah, you bet. So, excuse me, the proposed facility will house women that have already graduated the intensive recovery program. So at 83%, those 83% of graduates from the intensive program that will be downtown need transitional and supportive housing. We usually follow the women that we serve up to 36 months, and we see long-term recovery after that, just how the brain science works. Because of the nature of this project, women will be able to live here up to 24 months, and 3 hours of programming will be required to live there. So that's going to look like a group session, a one-on-one session, and a case management session. The other thing is that it will have the same requirements as the shelter downtown for substance-free living, zero tolerance, tobacco-free campus. This is probably going to be one of the safer areas just because of the programming level and the level of support that YWCA will be providing. We already provide outpatient services to the women that we can find places in our community and support aftercare and therapy, and then transition into community after 36 months. So by the time folks will have engaged their full 24 months at our facility, they will be looking for independent living somewhere in the community. Hopefully one of these, maybe probably RMDC or a number of the other RMDC or other affordable housing in our community. Does that help? Does that answer that question, Ellie?
I do think so, Jen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Ellie, this is Liz, just to reiterate all the points about, I keep saying it, drugs and crime and all of that. We have a very strict resident selection plan for all of our projects at Rocky. We don't allow violent and sexual offenders or drug offenders. And so we screen every single tenant. They have rules they have to sign by. We ourselves take care of the landscaping, all the snow removal, so it is not left up to our tenants. We actually do it. And then another point is just down the road from all of you, over by McHugh there's a place called River Rock Residences that is similar to the types of communities we build. Ptarmigan, Pheasant Glen, River Rock, they're all on the north side. They're beautiful. Every summer, they're manicured. We maintain them. There's no snow. We take care of them. The home values in those areas have gone up just like everywhere else in town. So anecdotally, right down the road, we have this type of development. So it's the same people. And I just want to say that, and that, I'm getting torn apart for Red Alder in the comments, and that place, they do have heat. And most of, I would say 80 to 85% of the people in that property are working. So if we want to keep going out to restaurants and we want to shop at Costco, people need a place to live. So that's all we're trying to do. Is we're not going to have, it is not cheap. Robin, stop it. We put in so much into that you can't see. And anyway, if you talk to the people who live there, it's some of the best places they ever have. So anyway, we take care of it. We make sure that our properties look nice, and that we screen our tenants, and we're trying to give people a chance, because if we don't have places, we're going to lose all our service. We already have no place to shop. So I didn't choose the colors. Anyway, I like what we focus on, that we're focusing on line dream entries instead of actually, taking care of our people who work at Costco, Target, waitresses, everything. That's who we're serving. So I think that's where I'm frustrated right now. And I don't mean to go off, but I'm just like, I'm feeling very personally attacked in this conference. And so we have Eagle Manor that's a 3-story as well on the other side of town. We keep that all landscaped as well. So if he is, let me know and we'll throw him out. But we can't, if we don't see him, we can't get him. So I'm on. But I'm leaving the chat now because I can't handle this any longer. Good luck to everyone.
This is Jacob Kuhntz, Helena Habitat Executive Director. I just want to echo what Liz and Jen said. We do background checks on all the folks who work with our program, specifically because they work together and they have children and they're building together. So sex offender checks, also violent offender checks are a big part of that. The folks who are talking about diminishing home values, there just isn't evidence for that. I know that's based on perhaps a fear of the unknown. What would affect property values as a for-profit developer got a hold of this property won't happen because of the nature of the church and their desire to live out their faith in action. That would maximize the units and like we're talking about with what's adjacent to the current neighborhood, create a neighborhood that basically maximizes the per unit valuation based on a need for cost structuring. And what you have here is organizations that have bonded together to build a really fantastic development that it has the commitment of organizations that in the long term we're going to be seeing to its upkeep and its future maintenance. So if anything, property values in the areas are going to increase.
I'd like to speak to the community aspect, if I could, just because I'm seeing just a lot of questions about certain populations in our community. I think that one of the best questions that YWCA asks ourselves is, what does neighborliness look like? And what does the community look like that I want to help shape? I think we have a real potential in a feasibility study. And so I'm seeing all the comments and I'm actually really appreciative because this team gets to go back and say, okay, how do we address this aspect? How do we address this next aspect? And then potentially come back with ways that can be better addressed. I think the thing to remember is that this land will be developed. We just get to pick who gets to develop it. And so when I think about the organizations at the table and what they want to frame our community to look like, it's questions like, what does a holistic community feel like? What does, kids that are interaction at an elementary school look like? If YWCA has a daycare, if Our Redeemers has a daycare, do those folks come from all around the community? And do those community memberships and affiliations start at a daycare level and then continue on into a school level? One of the things I'm really excited about this project is when we started talking as community partners, thinking about the community spaces that we could do. A lot of the women that we serve at the YWCA downtown really are looking for community opportunities. And so we've chatted about the community gardens and who could, raise food for Helena Food Share. I think it's important to know that as a national stat, and certainly in Montana, the empirical data says that 1 in 5 folks have some sort of relation to an experience to addiction. And that might be some of our more well-off socioeconomic folks that are doing prescription abuse. And it might be truly the opioid and meth epidemic that Montana is facing. I think what's important is how do we help those people recover and be good neighbors? We have an awesome success rate that we can prove through data and through a lot of different agencies that look over our programs, including federal and state. And I also think the thing that YWCA wraps around is not just how do we pay the rent on time and how do we make sure that our car isn't on the street when we go into a rental, but what does being a part and a stakeholder in a community look like in a way that a lot of our families have never had an opportunity to question. And so as I'm kind of looking for the cultural and the neighborliness aspect of the questions, I think what you have is four committed organization, including the church, really strategically and intentionally looking at how to build a positive neighborhood here that is not just about rentals.
Thank you so much to Liz Monstad from Rocky, Jen from the YWCA, and Jacob, of course, from Habitat. I do appreciate all of your comments, and you actually helped to address at least one of the questions posed about, the social good and community benefit of this overall project. So I think we're going to turn our attention away now, in the interest of time, away from discussing anything to do with tenancy or home ownership for this property, as far as the clientele and future home buyers are concerned, and focus instead on the actual proposed design. So I think that's where most of your questions lie. So moving on, the next set of questions really relate to streets and to traffic impacts. So one really quick question that I can dispense with, there was one image that showed the property that's proposed to be to the south of Horseshoe Bend that you can see on the screen as being R3 zoned. That is owned by a private developer. And that property in one of the renderings was showing an internal street. What I would like to say to that is the property developer for that will be able to determine how and what kind of infrastructure they're going to be installing in compliance with city standards come the time that they themselves are ready to move forward to develop that parcel, which currently is not, so far as I'm aware, in the works. But I just wanted to throw that out there. That is a separate development entirely, not a part of this discussion presently. And then as far as traffic impacts are concerned, obviously that's a huge issue. And we are going to be addressing that. This particular planning effort, again, this is super early days. There is no traffic impact study associated with this project yet, but we are definitely cognizant of the fact that there will be more vehicle trips per day added to the streets surrounding here. Obviously having the east-west connector of Horseshoe Bend is going to help mitigating some of that. And we are certainly very, very aware at the city of all of the issues with Custer and the level of service for the intersections surrounding. So to that end, I would like to say that there will be a traffic impact study that is going to be required as part of any subdivision application process that moves forward with this and/or rezoning. So there will be a full-on study done when we approach that point in time. And as far as Custer, some of you might be aware that, there's always been talk for years about will there be and when will there be any improvements to Custer to improve the level of service for that right of way and the intersections that stem off of it for at least this stretch of West Custer, I should say, between Henderson and Montana. So there are definitely ongoing discussions about that project. MDT are looking into it. The various city and county boards that deal with transportation issues are also looking into it to try and consider different designs. So that is an active project. I cannot speak to it exhaustively because I am not a party to it, but I do want to let you know that the various parties and powers that be are definitely trying to address that and make improvements to widen the street and add more lanes and more turning pockets. And for this particular project, I do also want to note that Horseshoe Bend, part of what's going to be required for this and what has already been approved by the Montana Department of Transportation is creating a southbound left turn lane onto Green Meadow from Horseshoe Bend. So that will be part of this project to help deal with traffic flows. And there was a question also raised about the Parks Department and basically what is proposed here in the southeastern corner of the development. Again, this is all very early day preliminary design information. The Parks Department, so far as I'm aware, hasn't been approached about this precise little park being created around the creek bed. But certainly as far as the maintenance of that and what it's going to look like, that will be addressed coming down the pike. And I'm trying to scan through the chat. Kara, can you let me know, are you seeing anything that I am missing here from questions? As far as the actual street types that we're going to see here, I can't speak quite yet as to whether streets will be collector streets or it looks like there's Alan Cormany's here and he says it will be a collector street, which is and needs to be wider. Is the properties? Oh, sorry.
No, I think you've covered a lot of the questions, Ellie. There was a couple concerns raised over when we'll get to the raised hands.
Yep.
I'm not sure if we're still planning to end at 7:30, but just wanted to raise that concern.
Absolutely. So let me take, will there be security cameras to address safety concerns? I will leave that to the developers, Britt and Joe. Let's see, why is TIS not involved? East of Benton. So there is potential, obviously, the land on the east side of Benton is owned by a private developer. That property is not annexed into the city as of yet. as and when they may choose to do so. We will be considering the traffic impacts from any development that they create. And as far as other emergency services, the police department, fire department, they will be providing services to any development that goes out here, whether it's this or any other one. Let's see. And I'm just scanning now in the Q&A. Thank you all for your patience. I've looked through the chat box and I think we've covered topically all the things that were brought up there. And then I'm now looking at the Q&A box. Will there be a stoplight at Green Meadow? I cannot answer that question. I do not personally know. I'm not a transportation engineer or planner, but I believe there isn't proposed to be a light, that it will just be a turn lane, as you see in the other developments along Green Meadow. And then there are more questions raised regarding school concerns. Again, the school district themselves stated, and I can let Gretchen speak to the conversation that was had, and it was very preliminary, obviously, because this is all very preliminary, but they are looking forward to this development. You know, it's easier for them to plan for future growth in the schools than it is to not know about the growth and then have to deal with declining numbers of the student populations. But Gretchen, do you have anything further to add based on the discussion you had, just to allay the concerns?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, they were very positive when we approached them. They said, we always welcome development. It is much easier to handle additional students entering the district than it is a shrinking population of students. And so they appreciated being in touch and aware of this development. They also appreciated that it's still several years out, so they have time to plan for it. Again, they weren't making decisions on the fly about how they would accommodate new students, but they said they will figure it out, and they have capacity again, and they welcome growth.
Thanks so much, Gretchen. I appreciate you fielding that question. So I'm just scanning through more comments that are coming in. As far as opportunities for more public comment, so I would at this time like to open things up to allow people, if they do have their hands raised still, to be able to ask their questions. I would like to say though too, as part of this overall effort, again, we're super early stages with all of this. I can't emphasize that enough, but come the time that there is a subdivision application moving forward or a rezoning of any of this land for the purposes of accommodating future development, there will be related public hearings with pre-zoning. There would be a hearing with the zoning commission, and then again with the city commission, 2 hearings in fact with the city commission. And then beyond that too, with the subdivision, there would also be public hearings held, with the planning board and with the city commission. So none of these things are going to happen in a vacuum by any means. There's going to be ample opportunity when things are more concrete and move forward to provide comments at those venues. As far as the present planning process, this is one neighborhood meeting. There might be the opportunity to have subsequent ones before any development plans started to get firmed up and in the works. But again, as Gretchen noted, we're not likely to see actual shovels, digging the, lay the foundations for any of these housing developments until possibly 2026. So this is a very much a long game. It's going to take a while to get all the planning done and to do it correctly with your coordination and support as neighbors of this project. So with that, I'm wondering, Kara, can you see if there are hands raised?
I can. We have, looks like 4 people right now.
Wonderful. Okay. And before we unmute everybody, it looks like we've got a 5th person. We're going to carry this over until 7:40, if that works for my fellow panelists. In the interest of the time, we did start 10 minutes late because we were having technical issues. So we're cognizant of that fact. We definitely want to hear from you. I will say, for purposes of decorum, I would like you to keep your comments, new comments or questions, the ones that haven't been posed already. We don't want to have a full rehashing of everything we've gone through in the interest of time and in consideration of every attendee's time tonight. So if we steer into territory where people are not being civil in their discourse, I do want to warn you that we do have the ability to mute you if needed. So with that said, laying that foundation, Gretchen, can you go to the last slide again really quickly? So for those of you that are queuing yourselves up to ask some questions, and I see a couple of the hands have gone down, so I guess some people had duplicative questions. So if you're using Zoom via a computer or a smartphone or a tablet, just use the raise hand feature. We'll call on you in the order that you show up, and we'll allow you to speak in that order. And just ask you to remain muted until you're acknowledged. And then if you're on the phone, I know we have a couple of attendees on the phone. If you wish to raise your hand, so to speak, just press *9. All right, so as far as the attendees who have their hands raised, let's see who's first up to bat. Thank you all for bearing with me. This is the first time that I am actually running one of these webinars, so it's a learning curve for me. Luke, it looks like you're first up to talk, sir. I'm going to allow you to talk now if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
We absolutely can, Luke. Thank you.
Perfect. Hey, I just want to thank you guys for putting this on. All the sketches and everything is fantastic. I do have a two-part question for you. Is this in cooperation with the City of Helena?
Yes, Luke, this is in cooperation with the City of Helena. Presently, the planning effort that was underway was actually funded by the partners that presented tonight, the housing partners and the church and the city, along with some funding that we received from a community development block grant through the State Department of Commerce. And that is for the purposes of creating the preliminary engineering report and also doing a feasibility study to assess the financial feasibility of getting these projects going at this site in part.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the second part of that question is, you guys mentioned food staples and being annexed into the city and that type of thing. Has there been any visibility on the 23 acres south of Winco or the 97 acres northeast of Super One that the city owns to move this development into?
Excellent questions, Luke. I actually don't know about plans for city-owned lands in those portions of the community. It's possible that Sharon Haugen is on the call, our former fearless leader and community development director. She might have some awareness, but to my knowledge, Luke, that there are no such proposals there. I will say though that there are other higher density residential proposals in that vicinity on lands that are privately owned, and they're being considered for annexation or development. Some of them are already in city limits and some of them are adjacent and looking to annex in. So there's lots of movement to provide housing in the community, but this is a truly unique opportunity to try to provide some truly affordable housing for our residents, be they the workers that Liz talked about earlier, or even, you know, our teachers, our police men and women. I mean, it's the whole gamut of people that serve the workforce.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome, Luke. Thank you. Okay, and the next person is Mike Talia. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. You're welcome to unmute and share your question if you'd like.
Hey, thank you very much. Promise you won't have to re-mute me. So I live in the Stone Meadows subdivision, and I think, I'm not trying to beat up the city here, but I think what you're seeing from a lot of our neighbors is that we feel a little bit burned by the Happy Homes development, and we kind of felt like we got caught sleeping. So everybody is quite active. It would be very helpful, I think, to have the density comments addressed in a very meaningful way, because I think that's where a lot of our concerns come with. It's in our face when we go up and down Benton. I'm very happy to hear about the access on Green Meadow, because that was supposed to happen up at Happy Homes and it didn't. And gosh, it would be awfully nice if the city could get out ahead of what's going on with Nistler's place there on the other side of the creek, because as you can see from the comments, we all have a lot of concerns with that too. And maybe if we knew what the city was going to tolerate over on that parcel, that might help calm us down a little bit on this side. And then just one last real question here, which is, I've always thought that a more mixed use neighborhood does a lot better, where you have kind of like what we have in Stone Meadows, some single family, some nicer homes, some less nice homes, some more nice homes, some multifamily homes, and you really can mix it up there. So you don't have, I came here from Great Falls, and there's a place in Great Falls called Parkdale. And when I see the plans here, I didn't live too far from Parkdale and Great Falls. It really makes me worry that this could turn into something like that. It was a pretty high crime area. So I would like to see the city and the partners help to address some of those concerns. I think RMDC's done a good job with their tenant control measures, for lack of a better term. But I don't think it's going to put anybody at ease until we see maybe a little bit more than just to take our word for it. Thanks much for the time, and I appreciate everybody getting beat up on here.
Thank you so much, Mike, for your comments and questions. I do want to just touch on it, as I think we've talked about some of what you've mentioned. I definitely deeply appreciate everything you put forward. Presently, there is no application in, just so everybody's aware, for the development on the east side of Benton Avenue. So I want to focus this discussion obviously on this development that we're talking about tonight on the Our Redeemer's land. But I do just want to state again that that project, the property that is owned by, I believe it's Gabe Nissler actually, we don't have an annexation application. We don't have a pre-zoning application. They have talked to us in the past over the course of just a very high-level pre-application meeting, but nothing has moved forward yet. And certainly, just like with this, with respect to a subdivision application or a rezoning application, we'd have a whole course of public meetings associated with any proposals that they bring forward, so that adjacent property owners and other members of the public will be able to provide public comment over the course of those hearings. Mike, I just really want to quickly allow you to unmute yourself. I can't remember if you had any other direct questions that you wanted me to answer.
Just to the point of whether the city is considering doing some larger scale planning with regard to more mixed developments, maybe even so different multi-family units, single family units, maybe even some light commercial, kind of like what this is showing. It would give me a measure of comfort, I know, and it would certainly, I think, be beneficial to all of the concerns that this development is intended to address, to know that the city is planning on a large scale how to work with commercial developers in particular on some of those issues, to bring in multifamily homes, nice single family homes, some light commercial, so that we have those good mixes in a neighborhood, and we don't have an enclave in town that's the rich part of town, and then another enclave of town that's the projects. So if we can kind of spread it out a little bit better, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does, Mike. Thank you. And you're right. When you have the blend of different income housing, and whether it's homeownership or rental opportunities provided in a development, rising tides float all boats is a saying, but there are anecdotal studies, and actually there are probably concrete studies out there, quantitative ones that show how it benefits everybody to have those blended residential districts. And certainly the city is a big proponent, where the zoning affords for it, to create mixed use, and that it would include the blend of commercial that you're talking about. We would love to see more commercial development that tries to blend both commercial and residential, that really fits in with one another and creates good quality neighborhoods throughout the community. So to that point, definitely we are strongly in support of that. And there are a lot of opportunities, especially in the B2 districts, in the downtown district, and the transitional residential zoning districts in town, where that's possible. And even some of the residential districts that we have on the books that skew much more heavily residential do allow for compatible commercial uses. And so we would absolutely 100% be in support of developers trying to develop to that type of market. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate your questions and comments. Let's see, the next person that is queued up is John Driscoll. John, I'm gonna allow you to unmute yourself and share comments that you have or questions.
Oh, I didn't expect to talk, but I really appreciate what you folks are doing together. It's very impressive. It's hard to do. I wish it could be done sooner. I mean, that's a long time out. that's the only thought. And I really would like to see a copy of the community land trust lease, you know, because in the end, that's kind of going to help us keep down the long-term cost of housing for the community in return for what it's offering to this project. Anyhow, good job. I really am impressed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. And Ermina, could you share links again to some of that documentation for John and the other participants? And certainly at a later date, you're welcome to send those same documents to me, and we can see about trying to integrate them into the city website. Additionally, there was a question about whether the recording of this meeting will be put out on the city website somewhere. And I think certainly I will try to see if we can get that done. If nothing else, we certainly will have some notes covering off the high points of the discussions tonight available on the website. We'll create a little subsection of our long-range planning page that kind of talks about this project a little more extensively.
Ellie, can I mention one more thing? This is Jacob.
The next person that is allowed to talk is a 406, let me see, 459-6341 number. So I would ask you to unmute, and you can do that by just hitting *6 on your phone. Looks like, there you go, you're unmuted.
Great. Hi, this is Kim Mangold, and I serve two hats. One is I
don't know if you're having any technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Looks like you're not able to get through, and I'm really sorry about that. I don't know if it's possible to put a question in the chat box quickly, but
Ellie, we are.
Looks like we are actually nearing the 7:40 mark. Oh,
Ellie,
everybody can hear her but me.
Yes, we can all hear her.
Can you still speak, Kim? We can hear you.
Yeah, you bet, you bet. Well, just they wear two hats. One, I live not far east from there, and that is my old neighborhood. And I just the other hat that I wear is I serve on the board at the YWCA, and I just want to.
I don't know if the individual with the 6341 number is able to is still talking, but if I am unable to hear her, unfortunately, if somebody could kind of summarize what was just being said by that attendee, that would be a huge help. I would appreciate it.
She hasn't finished speaking yet.
The other part about the beauty of this, the group getting together, is all of the partners. And as far as those of us on the Y, it's very important that all of the graduates that go from the YWCA into housing that would be by the Redeemer and then move even further into independent living is important. And so the success of the women and the children that go through our program is critical to our mission. And it is the mission of everybody else. And we're all getting together to make sure that we can actually design and provide that opportunity that allows them to look forward into independent living and home ownership. And so coming back to concern about the future, I think that we all are concerned about that ourselves as partners. And I think it is the beauty of the partnership that helps move us forward in this project, but also will ensure a successful opportunity for them to succeed. Thank you.
So I hear through the grapevine in the chat box that the person that was speaking on the phone that I couldn't hear was Kim Mangold. Kim, I'm so sorry that technical difficulties prevented me from hearing what you had to share. I don't know if Jen Gursky or anybody can encapsulate whether there were any questions posed by Kim, but I imagine, Kim, you were speaking in support of the YWCA and just this overall proposal.
You're right, Ellie, and she's finished.
Looks like you had unmuted for a second and are muted again, Jen.
That's really odd. I don't know if other people can.
So Ellie's having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Gretchen, are you able to take over? Because you're the
Okay, so apparently I'm the one that has the issues and nobody else does with hearing the participants trying to talk tonight. I am so sorry, everybody, that has just cropped up as an issue. With that said, we have reached 7:41, so we've been able to hold this meeting for an hour and a half as we originally had planned and promised. I do want to thank all of you for attending this meeting tonight. It is quite the big undertaking to consider this development proposal, and by no means are we anywhere near finished in the planning effort, and we absolutely will take the questions and concerns that were presented tonight into consideration as we move forward. This is going to be a huge community collaborative effort. It takes a village, and we definitely want to make sure all your input is provided. So with that said, again, thank you all so very much for attending tonight, and we look forward to working on this with all of you in the neighborhood going forward. Have a lovely rest of your evening, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.